Creating an array in PHP is very simple. If you want to initialize a variable to contain an array of information, you simply declare the variable to be an array. var equals array, followed by an opening and closing round bracket, and a semicolon. When creating an array, you can also initialize the array with information. In order to do that, you declare the variable var equals array, followed by a round bracket, and then the array values are set between quotation marks within the round brackets and separated by commas. var1, comma, var2, comma, var3, and so on, closed with a finishing round bracket and a semicolon. To initialize an array with names as the indexes instead of numbers, some guy equals array, birthday, followed by an equals and greater than sign, and then the value. In this case, you're telling PHP that the array some guy should have an index birthday with a value of 1975-0105, an index with the name age and a value of 30, and an index with the name height and a value of 5'11". You can also set array index value pairs just as you would set a regular variable. Some guy birthday equals, and then a value, some guy age and 30. Notice that the index names are within your square brackets and contained with double quotes. Or you can use index numbers. You don't have to use necessarily names. So if you want to set your own index numbers, you just set the number in between the square brackets and again assign the value. As with other PHP variables, you do not have to declare an array before you start to use it. An array can be built on the fly. For instance, let's say you want to know the sum of adding consecutive numbers together, but not just the final sum, but the result of each number being added to the previous sum. For the sake of this example, we want to store these values for use later in the script. Without an array, you'd have to do something like the following. Using, of course, our for loop here. When you finish this, and this little piece of script runs here, you'd have 100 variables named variable 1 through variable 100. This could be a nightmare if you wanted to recall values, print them out consecutively, or otherwise manipulate them within the script. So instead of creating a variable for each value, we put them into an array. And when we're finished, what we want to do is actually print them out to the screen. So you see we've got the same for loop, but instead of creating a new variable name for each value, we're actually just inserting the value of I as the index in the array. So the first time through, I will be 1, and then 2, and then 3, all the way up to 100. Now before I show you the results, I want you to pay attention to how we are printing out this array. We're using the PHP function printr. This function will print out the structure of an array and all of its indexes and values in a format that is easy to read on the screen. We surround it with the HTML pre-tags and closing pre-tag in order to format it nicely for the screen. The geek explanation is that when a printr command prints out, it uses tabs and new line characters to format it, which a browser does not recognize in HTML. So you end up with one run-on line of code that is hard to read. Placing it within the pre-tags ensures the browser will format properly with the new line and tab characters. So the results of creating this array on the fly would be, note that this array starts with that 1 instead of the 0. Because if we went back to the code, as I explained, we're defining the array index each time with the value of I, which starts as 1 rather than 0. This way, if you wanted to know the cumulative sum of any number between 1 and 100, you can directly call that by referencing our array like this. Let's say we want 44. Put a couple of break tags here to make it format nicely. We'll save that. And refresh. And there we go, down at the bottom, 990. Now if we look at array index 44, we have 990. So we'll get further into manipulating arrays, multi-dimensional arrays, and sorting arrays later in this chapter. For now, it's important to remember that an array generally starts with an index number of 0, unless you specifically create your array and define the indexes yourself. It's also important to remember that you do not have to initialize an array before you add values to it. You can add values at the time you initialize it, after, or in the process of initializing it.